In Connecticut, like I said, you can get a free copy of your child's school records just for the asking if your child attends public school. This isn't a special education thing. The request needs to be in writing, and email is considered in writing. And if you ask for the records in writing, you should get them within 10 school days. There is a provision for special education students, parents of special education students, if they make the request in writing and state that they need the records to prepare for a PPT meeting, the school records should be made available within 5 school days. In addition to getting a free copy of the school records, under a federal law called FERPA, parents are allowed, there's something in false or misleading, parents have the right to ask to have it corrected. So FERPA is a very effective federal law, but our right to a free copy of our child's school records, that actually comes from Connecticut statutes. Why don't I take the next question, and Marnie, if you could answer it. My daughter in grade 3 was just evaluated for special education. The tests are difficult and difficult to understand. I need help understanding them. What should I do? Marnie?
Well, the first thing is the best practice is to meet with the school staff member who did the evaluations. And often schools will set up a time to talk about those evaluations with you prior to your PPT meeting, just so you can go over any questions that you have, and they can explain everything from what the scores mean to how the testing was done. A lot of times there's a lot of different subtests, and it's really, really helpful to go through that with somebody to understand exactly how the tests were given, and what those scores mean, what the testing looks like as a whole. So usually the school does go through everything with you, and if they, for some reason, haven't reached out to you, I would definitely reach out to them to go through that testing so you have a full understanding before the PPT. If beyond that, you would like some help understanding, PATH offers a lot of wonderful services, and we can help with understanding that testing and help you prepare for that PPT meeting.
Yes, and if I could add, it's something that Marnie and I often find ourselves doing, going over records and explaining them to parents, but neither of us are clinicians. We're trained to be advocates or educational consultants more than anything else. So like Marnie said, the best practice is to contact the evaluator.
Great. So our next question is, can I ask for a PPT meeting, and how do I ask for one? Do you want to do that one?
Sure thing. I found that the best way to ask for anything is to do it professionally, put it in writing. Whether it's a PPT meeting or evaluation or something like that, put it in writing. And I don't say this because, oh, school people should be suspected of foul play. No, school people put everything in writing. It's the professional thing to do. And email is considered in writing. So to ask for a PPT meeting, I usually advise parents to do it in writing and keep it short, pithy, as they say. Short note saying, I request a PPT meeting for my son or daughter. Identify who they are, identify who you are, parent, guardian. But a parent's request for a PPT meeting cannot be turned down. Although I wouldn't advise a parent to ask for a PPT meeting twice a week or 3 times a week. But it is something that is very easy to generate just by asking.
And I think one thing that I wanted to touch on too is if your child is already in special education and it's necessary to have a PPT meeting once a year. So that meeting is required. But you can call a PPT anytime. If you feel like your child isn't making progress, the program isn't necessarily working for your child, you have concerns in any area, you have the right to call a PPT. And as Kevin said, I would do that in writing to your case manager or the supervisor, and go from there. But I have just, just so we're throwing it out there. Sometimes the school will want to have a team meeting. And I think it's important to know the difference between a PPT and a team meeting is that you can definitely have a team meeting and discuss any of your concerns, but no changes can be made to an IEP unless you're in an actual PPT meeting. So decisions on further evaluations or service changes, things like that cannot be decided in a team meeting. So if you're looking to make changes, you definitely need that PPT meeting. Or if you're looking for a deeper dive and would like to do evaluations, that falls under a PPT meeting.
Exactly. And Marnie, those team meetings that you mentioned, they do have a use, and
Very helpful.
a very good use. What I often advise parents is to ask for a ask for an informal team meeting
Yep.
on a regular basis, monthly, if necessary. This is especially important if you have a kid who doesn't come home and tell you everything that happened during the school day. If your only communication with the school people in that case is the parent-teacher conferences and the once-a-year PPT meeting, you're missing out on an opportunity to educate the school people about your child. So these informal team meetings, they can be very helpful. And parents, remember, the most important member of a team, whether it's the informal team or a PPT team or even a 504 team, it's the parents. And we as parents know our children better than anyone on these teams ever will. Um, Now, we might not be professional psychologists, we may not be related service providers, and the school people can help us understand our children in ways that we haven't understood them before. But it's parents who are the most, but any team for your child. And another reason is because as the years go by, it's the parents who are the constant. It's the parents who are always there as part of the team. The other team members, they will change as a child goes from elementary.
Yep. Yeah, and I have found, just to piggyback on that a little bit, I found the team meetings to be very helpful at certain points where I wasn't getting a whole lot from my kids on what was going on. So I found that to be very helpful as well. Our next question is, our son's sorry, we hear my cat in the background. Our son's pediatrician diagnosed our 11-year-old son with ADHD. She told us our son should be in special education. We see him struggle with reading and writing. What should we do? So the first thing I think we wanted to touch on is just a diagnosis doesn't mean your child will get special education. So your child can have a diagnosis of ADHD, even autism, and not need educational services. But if your child is struggling, that is when, the PPT process would come in. If you're finding that your child's disability, being in this case ADHD, the focus and attention is pulling away from instruction, and your child isn't getting that instruction and may benefit from supports and special services, that would be when to call a PPT. But just to be clear, that diagnosis in itself doesn't guarantee an IEP. There would have to be other factors that go along with it, looking at how your child is doing educationally, how they're performing in school and such.
Exactly, Marnie. And even though the diagnosis is helpful to the school people in understanding the student, eligibility for services, eligibility for that initial evaluation, the level of services, all the decisions in the special ed process, they're based on the student's performance and the impact of their disability on their performance. Some parents question why they have to go through an eligibility process when a professional, a neuropsychologist, say, has diagnosed their child with autism. It's just the way it's done. The school people have their own process for determining eligibility, and it's based on evaluations, day-to-day performance in the classroom, and tests and quizzes.
Our next question is, how should I prepare for a PPT meeting? And Kevin actually taught me this, so I'm gonna let you start, because he gave me a lot of wonderful tips in my early days on how to prepare and even write an agenda. So I'm gonna let you take this one.
Okay, thanks, Marnie. And I must confess, I learned this from somebody too. I was meeting involves doing your homework as a parent. And I think the most important thing you can do to prepare for a meeting is to get a copy of your child's school records and read them. Go over them with a school professional if you can, but it's important to understand how the school people look at your child. Another way to prepare for a PPT meeting, and this is something I did even before I was an advocate for my own son's PPT meetings, prepare an agenda, a list of your input and concerns. Don't call it an agenda. It's kind of confrontational. It's almost like saying it's your list of demands. It's just your input and concerns. About 2 weeks before the meeting, sit down, write up a list of any questions you have, any requests you have, anything you want to bring to the attention of the PPT team. Now, I usually, when I do that, I write up the list, I draft it, and then I put it away for a day or two, so that when I come back, it always seems I find ways to improve it. You may find that helps too. But once your list is ready, and by the way, the best lists like this are short and to the point. You don't even need to use entire sentences. The best lists like this fit on just one piece of paper on just one side. It's okay to be vague and non-specific. All the details will come out at the PPT meeting. It's more like the points that you want to explore. And then once it's to the school, understand your input and concerns and prepare an intelligent response. This makes a request, depending on the level of your request, they may need some time to think about it, and giving them that opportunity to do that in advance, it's important. When I help a parent prepare a list of input and concerns for a PPT meeting, I always end the list with a request to add the list to the record of the PPT meeting. And if you look at the IEP form, there are actually 2 places on the form where parents can put in their input and concerns. This list is your written statement for that section in the IEP. So it's important to prepare that list so the school people know what you want. It's also a great way to gather your thoughts and be prepared for the meeting. So do your homework.
It's definitely too, for me, I found it helpful if I have a lot of things I want to cover, that I remember to cover all of them, because I have walked out of meetings and been like, darn it, I forgot to ask this. So when I prepare a list ahead of time, I have everything down that I want to talk about at the meeting, which I think has been really helpful for me in preparing. So, okay, so our next question is, IEPs are being handled very differently this year. There is a new IEP form, and it seems like everything is online now. how is the new IEP different from the old one? And before we start answering, I am going to drop a link in the chat that is the Connecticut IEP manual that is really helpful in learning about the new IEP, but it's totally different document. If you're looking at it for the first time this year, it is a lot of changes.
There certainly are, Marnie. It's because of the introduction of the CT SEDS system, which stands for Connecticut Special Education Data System, where everything is online. However, if a parent doesn't have access, internet access, they can still get all the documents they need by mail or the old-fashioned way. It's important to remember that even though the new IEP form looks very different, in many ways, things are just rearranged into a more logical order. There are some parts that are taken out and put in a separate document, but none of the parental rights that are out there or the rights that a guardian has, none of that has changed. The new IEP is just a different way of reporting the same old stuff that the old IEP used to.
Yeah, one of the things I like about the new setup is I think it's organized in a way that's a little bit clearer. So you have the present levels of performance. Let's say we're talking about reading first. You have the present levels of performance, and then your goals and objectives for that area. So everything is kind of all together, where before you had all the present levels of performance kind of in the front of the IEP, and this it seems to go more, it has a better flow to it, at least as I think it's easier to understand in that way. But definitely taking some time to get used to, and taking our school systems a little bit to get used to, as well as they're getting out the kinks and working with the system for sure.
And they have had some kinks this year and some delays. These things happen.
Yeah, it was a whole new system, and I feel like no matter what district I'm at a meeting and they all say we're having some issues with CT SED. So I think we all need to be, a little bit flexible as the changeover to this new program. But ultimately, I think the document itself, at least for me, I found it a little easier to understand and a little clearer with everything kind of in a linear fashion in that way.
Marnie has posted links to two very useful documents from the Connecticut State Department of Education, the Bureau of Special Education. One of them is the Connecticut IEP Manual, everything you always wanted to know about the new IEP. The other one is a side-by-side comparison of the current Connecticut IEP and the new IEP. That gets right down into the nitty-gritty and shows you exactly what's different, comparing the two new, the new IEP and the old IEP side by side.
That was really helpful to kind of figuring it out as you go the first time. Having that side by side, I think, was really helpful. Our next question is, I am the legal guardian of my grandson who has autism. He is a special education student in elementary school. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only grandparent who is raising a grandchild with special needs. Do you know many grandparents who are raising grandchildren like my grandson? And this is a great time to talk about PATH's Parent Support Program. We have a program at PATH where we connect parents with, or in this case, grandparents with other parents or grandparents with a child with, we try to get the same disability, but in most cases, very similar disabilities or issues that parent or guardian is dealing with. We connect them with a parent who has taken our parent support training, our listener training, as we used to call it, and has gone through the process. So you're connected with someone who's been there, been in your shoes, and really kind of understands what you're going through. Being the parent, and in this case, a guardian, a grandparent of a child with special needs, can be very isolating and lonely, and it is really priceless to connect with someone who understands what you're going through. So I can put a link to that program also in the chat. I didn't know, Kevin, if you had anything more to say on it, but it's definitely, it's a wonderful program that we're very proud of. And I can also put our contact info in the chat as well.
Yeah, this is a very helpful program, and I've enrolled many of our past clients in it. There's nothing like the kind of support you get parent to parent, or grandparent to grandparent. Someone who is a veteran of what you're going through right now, somebody who can tell you what works, what doesn't work, and also that you can survive. It's important to have that kind of thing, to have someone like that in your life. And about grandparents getting involved in special education or their grandchildren's education, I'm kind of conscious of this because I happen to be a grandparent myself, a grandparent of 2. It will be 3 in July. And every year for the last 10 years or so, I have seen more and more grandparents raising their grandchildren. I'm sure it has some kind of implication for the society that we live in, but more and more I'm seeing grandparents raising their grandchildren. I even am in touch with a great grandparent
Wow.
who is raising her great grandchild. And actually, when her son was in special education, when her grandson was in special education, I helped her with that too. So it's a interesting situation. Makes teachers feel old when the children of their students come to school. Didn't necessarily make me feel old, but seeing grandparents involved to a greater degree, that's definitely a phenomenon that I'm seeing.
Definitely. I have quite a few grandparents as guardians that are navigating this process, sometimes for the first time. They not having been through it with their own children, they're navigating it for the first time. So definitely, I put our contact info in there. If you are a parent or a grandparent, guardian who would like to be connected with a support parent, we are happy to work with you on that. I put both the link to learn a little bit more about the parent support program as well as our email contact in the chat. So, all right, and this one I'm going to give to Kevin. What should we expect from special education next year? This is a little highlight.
Well, it's funny you should ask. That's what everybody is wondering about, because this year in some ways has been less than ideal for schools and school people and students. There's been a lot of pressure on students. Many students are experiencing mental health problems. There's an entire crisis around child mental health going on right now, and it's affecting schools. Not to mention the achievement gap that was created for special education students by the remote distance learning during the pandemic. And the shortages. There are shortages of staff, teachers, even school bus drivers. So what's it going to be like next year? Well, I'd like to invite you to tune in on June 6th at 7 o'clock, same time, same station, where we are going to devote an entire half hour to this subject and look into the crystal ball and see what school will be like for special ed students next year.
Yep. So join us again on June 6th. Again, we'll put out a notice on our Facebook page, as well as send emails if you're on our email list. And if, as a follow-up to this meeting, you have any questions, our contact info again is in the chat. Please reach out to us directly if you have specific questions about your child's PPT or your situation, where we'd love to talk to you. We're happy to help you. I think we're good. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a great night.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Marnie.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Kevin. Bye.